and welcome to the Flourishing Introvert Talks with me, Jo Rawbone. This is the podcast that celebrates the natural gifts of introverts so that we can flourish in all situations. Episode 168. Can introverts balance fulfilment with easy living? I was feeling stuck. The kind of stuck where I felt like I was trying to wade through treacle. When that happens, I get tired pretty quickly and feel my spirits dip. It sure feels like I'm traversing one of those valleys in life that I talked about a few weeks ago. And there are a lot of things that contribute to that treacly feeling for me. The weather, my health, social and environmental issues, and of course, my pesky inner critic. She, Gladys, if you've not been introduced to my inner critic before, seems to have the knack of knowing when I'm feeling just the intsiest bit vulnerable or uncertain, and she's in my ear like a flash. Talk about an annoying earworm. Anyway, I've noticed that the more difficult things feel, the more tired I feel. The more tired I feel, the lower my energy for getting unstuck, and the lower my energy, the less inclined I am to strive, to push through. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in many ways, a vicious cycle. At times like this, I find myself thinking, why don't I just jack it all in, retire and potter? I'm very good at pottering, and I have to say I love a good potter. At one level, I love the idea of spending my time pottering, and yet at another level, I know it just wouldn't be enough. This darned purpose of mine. I have a few friends who ask me when I'm going to retire. I have bags of knitting wool waiting to be started. I have a garden crying out for some attention, if only it would stop raining. And I have places to go and see. Anyway, when it happened to me again recently, a bracing walk along the seafront on an ozone-filled blustery day was enough to energise me for the trip back up the other side of the valley. So now I was back on neutral ground, but what lay ahead? More peaks. And they would require just as much effort, but at least the view from their summit would be more inspiring. Remember that. It becomes important later on. Inspiring. So guess what? That question re-emerged for me again this week when I was on the level looking at the peaks. I'd just worked with a room of 50 and 60-somethings who were unemployed and struggling to find a job that aligned with their purpose. This was accompanied by reports about the gender pay gap and the gender equality divide widening again, which is such bad news for society. And we know that women are not well represented in leadership positions here in the UK. And to cap it all, I read an article titled Meet Generation F It. These are youngsters bold enough to just step away from jobs that don't stimulate them, away from organisations that don't value them, and away from countries that don't inspire them. My challenge with this generation is that they appear to walk away rather than change things from within. And if the younger generation aren't prepared to step up and do that, who will? And now, here again was that question. Why don't I just take life easy? Great question, so why don't I? I knew that it was time for me to practice what I preach, time for some purposeful reflection that might lead to some shifts. And because I'm something of an open book, I thought it might be helpful for me to share my process with you, warts and all. My practice of choice here includes self-observation, and I've known from an early age that I have an ability to distance myself from me. I can be both the observer and the observed. This ability probably helps with being able to take the third perceptual position in NLP terms, where the three are
The first position is my direct experience of me. So I'm in my body looking at the world through my own eyes, processing it through my values, beliefs, emotions, through my own map of the world. The second position is where I'm standing in another person's shoes. So it's a position of empathy. I see things from their perspective, from their needs, desires, emotions, and perceptions. The third position, similar to self-observation, is a detached position, and that of the neutral observer, noticing without the emotional involvement. This is invaluable when you want to step back and get insights. My business principle and personal value of purposeful curiosity comes in really useful here, as I'm always eager to understand more about myself and get the insights, especially when looking to upgrade in some way. In order to be able to practice self-observation, like watching any animal in the wild, I need the 3 S's: space, stillness, and silence. Whilst those 3 may minimise the observer effect, whereby something being watched changes its behaviour, it takes much more discipline to observe yourself and not change just because you're being observed. Remember the Hawthorne effect, where there was a rise in productivity simply because workers in a company were being observed. So the idea is to observe objectively and then decide if changes might be advantageous. What am I observing though? I'm observing my thoughts, as the silence enables me to hear my inner thoughts, the meaning I'm making of what's happening around me, and any patterns in my thinking. I'm observing my behaviours. Where am I merely reacting, and where am I taking that pause that Viktor Frankl talked about and responding instead of just reacting? I'm observing my emotions, noticing where I feel them in my body, and then attempting to identify what they are. This is where I might refer to Brené Brown's Places We Go categories from her research, captured in her book Atlas from the Heart. Much of this sounds like what we'd now think of as mindfulness, doesn't it? By observing myself in this way, I'm giving myself the best kind of attention because it shows I care, shows I'm interested, and shows I'm not afraid to see myself. So I'll need to be quietly gutsy because I'll see all of me, the good, the bad, and the ugly. If you've not practiced this before, here are some basic steps to follow. Find a quiet and comfortable place where you can be alone and undisturbed for a while. Remember, space, silence, and stillness. Decide what you'll be observing: thoughts, feelings, bodily sensations, or behaviour. Alternatively, just tune into yourself and see what attracts your attention. Make sure, though, that by tuning in, you're not resisting what you don't want to see. Observe without judgment. Simply notice what is happening, including the resistance, without judging it as good or bad, right or wrong. Be open and curious about what you observe and get to know it. Using objective, factual, descriptive language, capture what you observe in detail. Avoid interpreting or analysing your observations. Next, stay present. If your mind wanders, gently bring it back to the present moment and continue observing. And lastly, reflect on your observations. After you've finished observing, take some time to reflect on what you noticed. What did you learn about yourself? How can you use this knowledge to make positive changes in your life? Do you want to do anything with the insights? Does anything need to be done? Through self-observation, I can be a resource to myself. I can get to understand better where I am getting in my own way and where I'm making things unnecessarily difficult or complex, where I'm choosing the path to the valleys rather than the peaks. We introverts are often very good at being in our heads and overthinking things. This gives us a way to be more in our bodies whilst observing from that perceptual position. What I achieved through my practice, and I won't go into all the details of what I found, is that I rediscovered my inspiration and reconnected with my purpose. I cannot achieve my mission to shift the bias and liberate introverts from a life of compliance without them. And I now know deep in my heart that I'm not yet ready to walk away from my mission. I have much to do, and frankly, pottering whilst appealing is possibly only self-serving and maybe even egocentric, whereas fulfilment combines serving self with serving others. Pottering feels like an easy life with little purpose. A fulfilled life feels purposeful, so less easy maybe, but more rewarding. And less easy is not the same as dis-ease, which personally I think is often the consequence. You might remember the 3 enduring factors of fulfilment from my earlier episode. The 3 are an unfolded self and life, which is the extent to which one can pursue projects that personally matter whilst being their unique self and leading a true life. The second is a worthwhile life, which is the perception that one can invest one's own capacities meaningfully. And the third is that positive impact and legacy, which is about doing something that matters to others and leaving something of value. Those 3 are mighty in my world right now. I encourage you all to unfold into a worthwhile life that leaves behind value. The business strategist Peter Stroppel defines my kind of legacy best when he says, legacy is not leaving something for people, it's leaving something in people. If you feel you have some unfolding still to do as you build your worthwhile life, book a call with me to explore if the Unfulfilled to Flourishing course is the right vehicle for you. The doors are only open for a few more days, and whilst it's not for everyone, it might be just what you need. Ultimately, the choice is yours. Easy or fulfilled, unfolded or bound, purposeful or aimless. Informed choice is what matters here.
If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, then please subscribe, rate us and leave a comment, because we know that helps other people find the podcast. And if other people find us, other introverts can flourish.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.